Leafs converts, TLCOGs, what's going on? This is the Leafs Convo podcast. My name is Norman James, your host. It is a pleasure to be with you, and it's a pleasure to talk about a Maple Leafs win, 4-2 over the Lightning in Tampa. It wasn't the greatest thing we've ever seen, but the Leafs get it done against the league's best team, thanks to some goals from guys who needed to score and a terrific goaltending performance from the one and only Freddie Andersen. So the question is this a sign of things to come? Mike Jello, who's usually a half-glass empty guy, seems to think, yes, indeed, it is. We'll get his take plus your take. You sent questions to us over Twitter. So what do you say? Let's go. The Leafs Convo starts now. And we've linked up with our good friend, Michael Jello. Hello, Mike. How are you?
Good morning, Norm. I am well. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I was pretty impressed with that 4-2 Leafs win in Tampa. The Bolts carried a lot of the play. They looked like the best team in the league, but that Freddie Andersen character, wow, he was something.
Yeah, you can always tell the difference between a team that has above average goaltending and average goaltending. And, no slight against Garrett Sparks or Michael Hutchinson, because, they needed Hutchinson to fill in the gap. But when Andersen comes back and he plays the way he can play, it makes the difference on most nights. And, the Leafs had their share of defensive giveaways and turnovers as Tampa did, but Andersen basically took the role of Vasilevsky from the previous game in Tampa, where Vasilevsky stood in his head. I thought Andersen stood on his head and was mainly responsible for the Leaf victory.
Are we going to say that the goaltender stood on his head and that's why the Leafs won, and still be concerned about what's to come? Or can we say, look, the goaltender helped steal this game for the Leafs, and perhaps they can turn the corner now?
You need to win a game in different ways all the time. And, the difference between last night and the game that they played previously in Tampa was Vasilevsky wasn't like superhuman, mortal. And the Leafs forwards were able to beat him. I mean, Marleau scores a goal. Kadri scores his first goal in, I think, 10 games. Marner and Tavares keep going. They got some offense. They didn't make any major defensive gaffes, and they had Andersen backing them up. So, I think it's positive, obviously, to go into Tampa, where I think they had won 6 in a row, and I think their record in the last 22 games is some sickening 19-2-1. It's positive to go in there and beat that team, but you have to put it in perspective. It's one game. And I still think that, and TSN did a poll a couple days ago after all the Gardiner stuff and said, do you think the Leafs have a defense that's good enough to be a Stanley Cup contender? I think it was 83% said no. This team will not be a contender unless they upgrade their blue line.
When the mainstream media asks that question, it's legitimate, but we've been asking that question for how long now, Mike? That's what we do here.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's what we do here on the Leafs Convo. Tampa had won 9 straight at home, and the odds of them winning a 10th straight are more difficult than if, they're on a 3-game win streak on home ice. So they were bound to lose. The Leafs have to turn the corner here. You need guys like Nazem Kadri and Patrick Marleau to pick it up. And it was a relatively mistake-free game from the usual culprits like Ron Hainsey and Jake Gardiner. And if you get a mistake-free game, good goaltending, guys unearthing themselves as offensive contributors yet again, and then the Tavareses and Marners continuing to do their thing, I don't care who you're playing, you're going to find success. So they did.
Yeah, and on one of the goals, I think it was Kadri's goal, or it may have been one of the other ones where Nikita Zaitsev came down the wing and centered it. And made a nice deep rush into the zone. I think Kapanen had taken the puck, and then Zaitsev had gone in deep, and it led to a Leaf goal. And you need to see more of that from guys like Zaitsev. He is capable of doing that. He did that in his rookie year, but for some reason he is, they have given him that sort of defensive cover-up role paired with Jake Gardiner, and it doesn't really suit him. And now we've started to hear some talk about Zaitsev's name being out there on the trade market, and I don't know how productive or counterproductive that is to their improving their defense.
People get upset with players. They say they suck and they want them traded, but how is a player you think sucks and is playing sucky going to reap you any sort of benefit via trade if they're not running peak. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Nikita Zaitsev, 25 minutes, 54 seconds, leading all Maple Leafs in ice time last night. Ron Hainsey, 23 and a half minutes. Morgan Riley, only 22 minutes, 21 seconds. Jake Gardiner, God bless him, went right back out there and did his thing like he usually does. He's a good soldier, 24 minutes, 49 seconds on the ice. It was certainly nice to see. The Leafs scoring all their goals 5-on-5, Mike. And the Leafs will pick it up on the power play. We want to see this team score 5-on-5. But there are some positives. The key now is to use that victory to catapult the team towards more success. And hopefully more guys can begin contributing, because once all hands are on deck with this squad, they are formidable and they will be tough to beat. And I'm not sure, even with 60 points on the season and doing as well as they have, that we've seen this team completely together, cohesive, running on all cylinders. And maybe that's yet to come.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Their winning stretch earlier in the year was some of it was during when Matthews was out. It's funny that they have not played at their best when they've had their closest to their full lineup out there. I still think, though, there are a few things. I mean, it was productive, and it was optimistic that Marleau scored, that Kadri scored. That some of the guys who've been on the Schneid recently have gotten in there. But I looked at the new combo, or the new old combo of Hyman, Matthews, and Nylander, and it left me wanting more. Hyman gets the empty netter, I believe, off of that weird bounce off of the glass. But really, it didn't spark that line too much. Matthews had a couple opportunities, and Nylander, after the first period, again. I mean, I don't know if it's just him, not being in shape or what. It's just, or if it's something checking out mentally. But he plays well early in the game, and then sort of gets just. There's a malaise there in the last half of the game.
Well, the head coach has to manage that, Mike. He's got to be able to see that and manage it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he definitely has to. I mean, it can't simply just be let's move the lines around, because they've done that already. In the latter half of the game, at least for a few shifts, I saw Connor Brown move up onto that line with Matthews and Hyman. I think it was probably more because it was late in the game and it was a 1-goal game, and Nylander still is not. Even when he was going great guns, he wasn't the greatest two-way player. He's more of an offensive weapon. But they really are going to need at some point Nylander to kick it into gear. But right now they're being able to survive with him only having 3 points in 18 or 19 games.
Well, you know what? He's snapping that shot off nicely. I wish not just Nylander, but any player would cool off on trying to pick corners all the time. When Austin Matthews is going at full 100% fitness, he can pick a corner. Still, I'd like to see these guys shoot a bit lower. It's sexy to pick the corner and go top shelf and put it under the banister, but especially if you're don't have any puck luck, or you're snake bitten a bit and things aren't working out for you, you just got to try to find a way to score a goal in any way, shape, or form. I think it's going to come for William Nylander and Austin Matthews as well, and perhaps these guys at some point will be able to carry the team, lead the team a little bit in the same way that Mitch Marner and John Tavares have. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James, along with Mike Jello. Do you expect now the Maple Leafs to find their bearings and get going here?
Well, I mean, they really need to. And Florida is a team that's struggling. Obviously, on the outside looking in, they're supposed to get Vincent Trocheck, their injured center, back after the All-Star break. So the Leafs have to take advantage of playing against them without him. I mean, they had a tough time handling Barkov in a game in Toronto earlier this season, and I mean, it's a tough thing, coming off the high of a victory against Tampa, second of back-to-back games. More than likely, I'm assuming it hasn't been confirmed yet, but Garrett Sparks is going to start this as it usually does in the second of back-to-back. That'll be his first start since late December. So it's also going to be a test of Sparks and his ability to come back from the concussion and to be a little more consistent, because the Leafs are going to need that, because they can't play Anderson as much as they did before the injury. We know that I think it's fairly safe to say that the injury was caused by the
Mm,
overuse of Anderson by Babcock. And if it's not Garrett Sparks who can provide that rest, not only in the second of back to back, but occasionally, like, in the middle of a long stretch where there's a rest day in between, it's sometimes nice to get your starting goaltender 3 or 4 days off. So they need Sparks to step up, but they also need everybody else to step up and take out a team that is clearly not going to be a playoff team.
whether they're winning or losing, Leafs management is aware that this team needs to level up. It needs upgrades. And I hope that the Leafs can make these upgrades, add these accessories, help embolden the team from a position of strength. While this team is doing well, make it even better. Did you see Nikita Kucherov strip Zach Hyman of the puck as he was trying to leave the zone last night? That it could happen to anyone, but it's funny how Zach Hyman's in his own world thinking he's free and clear. He just gets stripped. Kucherov grabs it, sends it back, and it's an opportunity. Even NHL players who are terrific at their craft can look like fools on any given play.
Yeah, that was the same play that Mikko Rantanen did on Kadri in the game against Colorado. He lifted his stick, he turned it the other way, and ended up tying the game. So it's it happens to the best players in the league can do that, and it can happen to good players like Hyman and Kadri. Let me just say one thing. It was funny because Kasperi Kapanen had a phenomenal game yesterday, and the people at Sportsnet, who I have a lot of respect for, in between the period, and I realized the want to ask the question and sort of get some speculation and some heat going when it comes to talking about the Leafs, but they're putting up a graphic about Kapanen and how much
I saw
his next contract is going to be. You got to remember, Kasperi Kapanen scored 7 goals last year. This is his first good year. Teams do not sign players to $3 and $4 and $5 million unless it's a long-term deal. Who have won 20-goal season, and he's probably going to have 20 to 25 goals. And I like him, and I think the Leafs are going to keep him, and he's going to be a future piece of this team. But that does not mean he's not going to sign a bridge deal, and it's probably going to be around what Connor Brown signed for, because Connor Brown scored 20 goals in his rookie year and he got $2.1 million. So unless they're going to sign him for 5 or 6 years, I don't think it's going to end up in the $3 to $4 to $5 million range.
It's all about drawing viewers. It's all about bringing people in, getting people talking, even about things that we don't need to talk about at this point. And, anytime I see a report or speculation about William Nylander being traded in the offseason, considering you and I have discussed that at length, and both of us expect him to be either shopped around or other teams to explore his availability when this season's done. As of right now, I just want to focus on what's happening with this team. Let's get to some comments and questions from some TLC OGs and Leafs converts, and then we will put this one to bed. RJR, radical thought. Is Mike Babcock the right coach for this talent assembled currently?
I think so. We will see. I know that the criticism and the has started to rise on Babcock, and I think, and I've talked about this on numerous convos and on the Buzzcast that I do, that if the Leafs have a first round out again this year, the heat is going to be placed squarely on the shoulders of Mike Babcock. He had a lot of first round exits in Detroit. He's had 2 so far with the Leafs, and if they go out after adding Tavares, if they go out in the first round, the criticism will be on him. But I think he's very structured. I think he's very organized. I think he motivates. The thing you have to be concerned about with Babcock, as it was with Detroit, is after a while the message gets stale and the players start to tune him out. But I don't think that's the case right now.
The players are too young, Mike. The players are still too young. Honestly,
and they're hungry to win, and I think that's what they will take the authoritarian stuff from Babcock because they want to win.
Nothing's going to change. The players on the ice are the ones who are either going to play at a higher level than we think they will, or reduce themselves to a level that would be unsatisfactory to many. Daver, hearing rumors of rumblings regarding Jake Muzzin.
Problem is Jake Muzzin's a left shot defenseman. Unless you're going to move Morgan Riley to the right side or Travis Dermott to the right side, I don't see how trade. The Leafs are willing to trade a first-round pick. That's been reported by Pierre LeBrun. It's not a great revelation because their pick's going to be low, and I think they're going to go for it this year. But if you're gonna go for it, it's going to be a right shot defenseman. You might go that way if the price comes down. But I think that if you're trading a prospect like a Grunstrom or a Bracco or somebody like that, or Trevor Moore, somebody like that in the minor leagues, plus a first round pick, you got to get a player that fits the need of the team, and that's not a left shot guy; it's a right shot guy.
Jack Rogers at Yarmouth Clipper. I like that name. Do you think Matthews' effort and play has been affected after his second shoulder injury? If this continues, his timid and peripheral play, will and should this affect his asking price?
The funny thing is that he came off the injury and scored, I think it was 7 points in the first 3 games. In terms of his asking price, right now he was scoring at a goal per game pace, and nobody expected him to maintain that. Now, I think he has 20 and 30 games. He's going to score 40 goals. So I think that he was not going to score 80 goals in 80 games. So I think he's going to get close to McDavid. I still don't know whether it's going to be more than McDavid, but I think it's going to be close. So I don't think a 10-game slump is going to really affect, his asking price to a greater or lesser extent.
Is Matthews as good as McDavid, Mike?
No,
McDavid's nuts.
Yeah, nobody's as good as McDavid.
Doesn't mean we don't love Austin Matthews.
Yeah, and I had a discussion with somebody in hockey circles who covers the league, and said that the thing that you have to worry about with McDavid, and right now he's 2 or 3 strides ahead of anybody in the league, is when he starts to lose that advantage. Whether he because he's not the biggest guy, but he's got incredible hockey sense. Matthews, because he's bigger and he's stronger and he's a different type of player, later in his career may be able to adjust easier to a different role because of his size. Whereas McDavid is totally reliant on his skill and his speed.
Well,
and if he loses a little bit of that speed, how it's going to affect his game.
What about Sidney Crosby? I mean, he's not the biggest guy either, but.
No, but Sidney Crosby. I've heard it referred to Sidney Crosby as the greatest grinder in the history of the league, and he did that when he was 19 years old, and now he's in his 30s and he's still doing that. So there hasn't really been that adjustment to his game. He hasn't really had to make that adjustment to his game because I think he's still playing the same type of style that he did as a young player.
I remember in the 2005 Memorial Cup. It was Rimouski in London. Sidney Crosby's in the corner with the puck. Mark Mathot, Drew Larman, Brandon Prust, all 3 of them have him pinned up against the boards. He's on his knees. Who comes out of the corner with the puck? Sidney Crosby goes top shelf on Adam Dennis. Watching that right there, I've never seen anything like it. It was absolutely sick. Last question. Jeremy Scott, one of our friends from the Maritimes. We've got a lot of supporters out of New Brunswick. It's amazing. Beautiful place. So what was the real difference in last night's game, the 4-2 win over the Lightning, compared to, say, the last 10, Mike? What was it about that game? Was it the fact that the Lightning, although the way they shoot the puck, they want to put it through the net. They shoot so hard and with such aggressiveness and such confidence. Was it the fact they just couldn't buy one last night or buy that 3rd and 4th goal? Or did the Leafs do something different that we should look forward to seeing more of?
It may be oversimplistic, but the difference was Freddie Anderson in that 10-game window. You got to remember at the end of his play in December, he was dealing with the groin issues. He didn't play that. He's only played his 2nd game since December 22nd last night. So, and he came back and he was rusty against Colorado. I don't think he was at his best. And at the end, he was not. When he played the Rangers on the 22nd, and there was a couple games before that where I thought he was not as good as he had been. I mean, now in retrospect, it had to be the fact that he was struggling with those groin problems. So that 10-game window is a not 100% Anderson, Sparks, and Hutchinson, and the defensive struggles. Now they were able to overcome any defensive problems because their offense kicked in and because Anderson played like Anderson has played the entire year. But I think simply the difference between those 10 games was Anderson.
Yeah, that Lightning power play is frightening. In the same way the Leafs power play has been frightening. It's Tampa shoots the puck and they carry the play with such authority. It's frightening, although it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do what they're doing right now all the way through the regular season, through the tournament, and finally hoist that cup. You'd think that based on what's happened with John Cooper and that team over the last 3-4 seasons, that the culmination of it all would be another Stanley Cup. And I look at them now and think that's the team that's probably or should win the Stanley Cup. It doesn't mean that it's their divine right and that the process here is going to result in them winning it all. The Maple Leafs could step in and change history. It's certainly going to be tough. Michael, thanks so much, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Norm.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Leafs Convo podcast. Thanks so much for being here. What do you think of what we do? You can let me know how you feel about the Leafs Convo and our content at Norman James TLC on Twitter. Oh, by the way, I want to welcome Haley Saul Mason. She is from Cardiff, Wales. She's going to join the Leafs Convo as a creator beginning in February, covering women's hockey plus Leafs-related stories out of Europe. You can get at her on Twitter at SoulLace84. For Mike Augello, I'm Norman James. We'll talk to you soon. The Leafs Convo is out.